following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Yo, Philly, how are you doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. In 1974, Tommy John, a 31-year-old sinker ball pitcher with the Los Angeles Dodgers, was coasting through the season with a 13-3 record. A veteran of 12 major league seasons, John was an expert at getting hitters to ground out and into double plays, and a key contributor to the Dodgers' resurgence. L.A. would go on to capture its first National League pennant in 8 years that season. But by that time, it appeared as if John had permanently damaged the ulnar collateral ligament in the elbow of his pitching arm. Dr. Frank Jobe saved the hurler's career by replacing the damaged ligament with a tendon from his right forearm. With extensive therapy, John was able to pitch 14 more years, never missing a start. At the time, the procedure, known as Tommy John surgery, was revolutionary. But today, it is quite common. In fact, between 2003 and 2014, the number of Tommy John surgeries increased 343%, with the highest rise in the 15 to 19-year-old age group, according to a study published in the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery. To help us understand this phenomenon is my guest, Jeff Passan, who covers Major League Baseball for Yahoo Sports and is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Arm, Inside the Billion-Dollar Mystery of the Most Valuable Commodity in Sports. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Bill. I appreciate it.
Let's begin with the injury that leads to Tommy John surgery. What exactly is the ulnar collateral ligament, and how does the pitching motion result in tears?
The ulnar collateral, I can't even say it anymore. It's been a couple of years since I wrote the book. Let's try this again. The ulnar collateral ligament really is the fulcrum of the arm. It holds the upper and lower arms together. And without it, you really can't throw a baseball. Now, there are some cases like R.A. Dickey, the knuckleballer who pitched forever, who didn't have a UCL, and his body adapted around him. By and large, if you tear your UCL, you cannot throw a baseball. And unfortunately, this minuscule band of tissue in your elbow is really fraught with peril. It can tear because of the stress and the strain that comes up through the legs, in through the back, up into the shoulder, loads in the shoulder, and when the shoulder internally rotates, which means your arm starts coming forward, almost all of the pressure goes down into your elbow and onto your UCL. And it's why we've seen that explosion in UCL injuries and surgeries that you were talking about at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, you followed the careers of Todd Coffey, who underwent Tommy John surgery twice between 1998 and 2012 as a journeyman reliever, and Daniel Hudson, who also had that same surgery twice during a 10-year career as both a starter and later as a reliever. And you observed one of those surgeries, I believe it was for Coffey, and you give a pretty graphic description of the procedure. Can you tell us briefly, not necessarily graphically, but briefly, how that torn UCL was repaired?
It was a little more complicated with Todd Coffey because he had the surgery when he was 19 years old. He came out of a small town in North Carolina and was a late-round draft pick and signed for literally $1,000. And he went into camp, and he was out of shape, and they tried to get him into shape, and his throwing motion got messed up. He tore his UCL, and he had the surgery. And the first time he had the surgery, they tried to take the palmaris longus tendon, which is in your forearm, and the one in his left arm, it was not thick enough. And they looked at his right arm. The one in his right arm wasn't thick enough either. And then they looked to get a tendon from his leg, and that tendon snapped when they were trying to tie it tight. So they went for a fourth incision in addition to the one in his elbow, and finally they got a worthwhile tendon. And the tendon, what the body does is it takes the tendon and it turns it into a ligament. It's an incredible process, and what the human body does to heal itself and to adapt really is unbelievable. And with Todd Coffey, his lasted more than 13 years. But after it broke again, they had two choices. They could go and look for another ligament in his body, or they could find one from outside of his body. And he did not like the idea of the latter, so the doctor, Neil Elatrash, went essentially hunting through his leg, looking for a decent tendon to use, and just couldn't find it. I remember him sitting there with his head, he had a finger behind it, and you could see through. It was, there was barely any opacity there. And so he's like, this is not good tissue, we can't use it. So his nurse brought in a hamstring tendon from a cadaver. And somebody else's leg tendon made Todd Coffey's new arm. That's the easiest way to describe it.
Wow. There's nothing new about arm injuries to pitchers. In fact, the great Sandy Koufax retired at the age of 30 because of chronic pain. And this was a pitcher who, in an abbreviated 11-year career with the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers, was a 3-time Cy Young Award winner, a 4-time World Series champ, a 2-time World Series MVP, and pitched 4 no-hitters in a perfect game. But he was limited to 165 wins. Now, you scored a rare interview with Koufax, who is a pretty reclusive individual. He rarely comes out of the Lehigh Valley here in Pennsylvania. In your book, you point out that Koufax often threw 160 or more pitches in a game and worked on short rest. And you also described the routine he took to prepare for games, and this is unbelievable. And I quote you, on the day before, the day of, and the day after his starts, you write, Koufax ate a white and orange capsule of butazolidine, an anti-inflammatory originally intended for horses and totally considered unsafe for human consumption. He eased the pain with a codeine-cut aspirin. Then, before Koufax pitched, the Dodgers training staff snapped on rubber glove, scooped a glob of Copozoline, a clear pungent balm, and applied it to Koufax's shoulder and back. Copozoline wasn't a salve so much as a declaration of war. It consisted of 3% pure capsaicin, the active ingredient in chili peppers, along with turpentine, camphor oil, and other elements that punish the body with heat. Koufax needed it to manage his misery. That is unbelievable. Would Koufax have benefited from Tommy John surgery if it had existed in the 1960s?
It might be called Sandy Koufax surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, if Frank Jobe had, it's what he said to me. Frank Jobe, may he rest in peace. If Frank Jobe had thought to do what he did with Tommy John earlier, Sandy Koufax would have been the guy. And look, the technology was not around then to understand what was wrong with Sandy Koufax, and so the idea that he was going to be the guy to get the surgery for the first time, it's just not rooted in fact. But yeah, I think Frank Jobe and I think Sandy Koufax, to a point, also believes that his ulnar collateral ligament was damaged and that he could have benefited from this. Now, maybe it was his rotator cuff too. Maybe his whole arm because of the volume of pitches he threw.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine what his career totals would have been if he was able to pitch past the age of 30? I mean, he could have been the greatest pitcher of all time, period. It's just amazing.
I mean, I think you can make an argument that he is.
Yeah, you probably can, but there'd be no doubt in anybody's mind. No doubt.
Right.
My God.
His peak his peak was about as good as it gets.
Yeah. Let's turn to Coffey and Hudson. Now, both of these pitchers threw a sinking fastball, clocked at 96 miles an hour, and a slider at 84 miles an hour. Do those particular pitches, and I'm not saying a screwball, I mean a sinking fastball and a slider, do those pitches make the arm more susceptible to a torn UCL?
It's tough to say. These are such individualistic issues, and while the commonality among them is that you wind up injured, it's never the same thing for each guy. There's always something, I think, that is going to make someone more susceptible. And with Todd Coffey, maybe it was a slider. Maybe it was his fastball. Maybe it was something else. With Daniel Hudson, maybe it was his delivery. Maybe it was his genetics. I just don't know. And that's the difficulty of not of diagnosing, but of stopping this and preempting it. It's that there's no silver bullet. There's no magic potion. There's things you can do to potentially mitigate it, and I think that's what needs to be done at the youth level. But is it ever going to stop the injury? Is it ever going to take it away entirely? No, I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm. You write that Tommy John surgery consists of only 2 days that matter: the date of the procedure and the date of the return. In reality, the days in between matter far more than either. The mental grind is the truer test. It changes a man, even when he's certain it won't. Tell us, what does rehab entail, and how did the mental grind that accompany it change Coffey and Hudson?
I think it helped them recognize, especially Daniel Hudson, because he hadn't been through this before. Todd at least knew what this was going to entail. But with Daniel Hudson, I think it made him realize, A, how much he loves playing baseball, and B, just how much he values the work. Like, to do it once, it's hard. To do it twice, back to back, is a mental feat unlike just about anything that I've ever seen. Because I could have very easily, after that first time, said, you know what, this ain't going to work. I'm done. It's not worth doing this again because I don't know what's going to come of it. And thank you, baseball, but no thank you, baseball. But he said, you know what, instead of the 11 months it took this time, it's going to take 16 or 17 months next time. And I'm ready to do it because I want to get back out there. And not only did he get back out there, but he did so successfully and ended up doing well for himself and for his family, and still trying to pitch these days. It's tough in baseball to be a free agent right now, but the rehab is, the physical part of it you just deal with it. The mental part of it is the difficult part, though, because not only are you not contributing, but you're doing the same boring thing day after day after day and just wondering, when is this going to end? It's just monotonous.
Mm-hmm. For me personally, one of the greatest contributions of this book is hopefully going to be its impact on amateur baseball. And I know that there is a personal concern here. You have two sons who I guess by now are either approaching the travel ball stage or in it. Is that correct?
My eldest is 11, and he does not play travel ball.
Okay, probably a good thing. But
very, very, very much a good thing. And he could. It's not for lack of skills. I just part of it is the whole notion of travel ball horrifies me. But beyond that is, I don't think he wants to. The idea of playing 60 games during a summer does not appeal to him in any way, shape, or form. He likes baseball a lot, but he wants to have a life, and I think he sees kids who play travel ball don't have lives.
Oh, you better believe it. I coached travel ball for 3 years.
Yeah.
One of the goals you say of writing this book is spending 3.5 years researching it and writing the book was to use the power of Coffey's and Hudson's stories to humanize a limb and get kids and their parents alike wondering how to keep the arm healthy. Now, you have to have great concern about the growing for-profit ventures that are dominating amateur baseball these days. You got companies like Perfect Game holding year-round showcases and tournaments, parents hoping that their son will parlay his ability into a Division I baseball scholarship, maybe even the possibility of being drafted, and those parents spend exorbitant amounts of money for these showcases and these tournaments. Yet for pitchers, that's only going to lead to repeat use injuries like torn UCLs. And you address this issue in the chapter titled Young Guns. Jeff, what does amateur baseball have to do to reverse the astonishing rise of Tommy John surgeries in that 15 to 19-year-old age group?
There's no panacea, right? And I'm not saying that there's ever going to be, but there are clearly patterns that have emerged through research, through what Jim Andrews has done, the American Sports Medicine Institute with Glenn Fleissig and others, that show overuse is problematic. And when you're in a culture that encourages winning at an extremely young age, where winning is the priority, there's going to be overuse inherent in that. And so, look, I would love to say that every parent out there needs to be responsible and believe that that's going to happen, but I know it's not. So it's incumbent on coaches, and it's incumbent on parents to hold coaches responsible, and it's incumbent on leagues to clamp down on coaches who overuse kids. And it's incumbent on people to understand that in earnest, baseball recruiting doesn't start until you're about 16 or 17 years old. Not with big league clubs, at least in America, not with big league clubs, and not with colleges. And if you're trying to throw as hard as you possibly can before that, no point in doing so. Because just because you're good when you're a sophomore does not mean you're going to be good when you're a senior. And the notion of tapering up to that is a much better strategy, I think, than what so many of these kids are doing and burning out on.
The concern that I have had is that everything filters down from the major league level. We saw it with steroids going into the colleges, particularly the JUCOs and the D1s, into the high schools. In fact, I did a book on Taylor Hooton and Rob Garibaldi, the two young men who became addicted to steroids and committed suicide, and their parents opened testimony in the 2005 congressional hearings on steroids in Major League Baseball. And it just seems the same thing is happening here. And if you offer a surgery that is going to be corrective, then, why wouldn't a kid, why wouldn't a young pitcher just continue to do this? And, one of the things that
I think, and I know that was a rhetorical question, but I will answer it because the greatest predictor of a future arm injury is a past arm injury. So if you get hurt once, chances are you're probably going to get hurt again. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like, you can look at the success of Tommy John surgery, and it does have a pretty decent success rate. Like, there's no denying that. But there are also a lot of cases that you don't hear about because the guys just don't make it back. And, I'm going to be writing about one of those this week. They're everywhere. And the success, this is one of those scenarios in which the successes understandably should be lauded because they do outweigh the failures, but the failures are prevalent enough that ignoring them is an ignorant thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I wanted, before we close here, I do want to go back to a related issue here in terms of amateur baseball. Last November, you wrote a piece on Yahoo Sports that discussed an MLB initiative to start a summer league for elite high school players. It was called the Prospect Development Pipeline League, and that's supposed to, I understand, supposed to start this June and run through early July. And the outcome of that is to invite 80 of the premier rising seniors in the nation to play a high school game during All-Star Week. Now, in the essay, you wrote that, quote, if successful, the league could perhaps challenge the current system in which successful youth players typically come from well-to-do families with for-profit ventures like Perfect Game almost monopolizing a showcase circuit that parents see as imperative to children's development. And you add that teams and colleges have emboldened that notion, attending the events because they offer the greatest concentration of talent in one place. So, if a player's wealth or his family's wealth is removed from the equation, do you think that arm injuries, repeat use injuries, could be reduced? Because there might be a correlation here between, these more well-to-do families, the pressure they put on their kids and the money that they throw around to have them pitch more and create these types of injuries. Because, I certainly would not rely on MLB to take a greater responsibility for protecting young arms, but maybe we're going to level the playing field here and possibly reduce Tommy John surgeries if we open the playing field to different socioeconomic classes. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think it's going to be too small of a sample, honestly, at the beginning to see that. I don't know that this is going to have guys playing less necessarily. I hope that's the result, because I think kids just play too damn much baseball, and that it's not like they're preparing for some sort of a minor league season or anything like that. The idea that they have to be somewhere every weekend, not just playing the game, but doing it one inning at a time, trying to max out with your velo rather than get touch and feel on a pitch or work on your command. That's the part that's insane to me. And if this can, I think the idea of this first is to really get the best players to be under MLB's umbrella and to see if the system works, and then if it does, hopefully try to expand it into other areas where kids who don't have the opportunity to play in showcases because their families just don't have any money now have the chance to do so.
Mm-hmm. What's next, Jeff? What are you working on?
Well, I'm at ESPN now, so I am working on figuring out where Bryce Harper and Manny Machado are going to sign. No book.
Well,
no book
everyone in Philadelphia,
right
of course,
now
hopes that they're going to land in Philly. But I personally don't want either one of them. I'd hold out for Trout, and I know that's probably a ridiculous thing to say, but there's got to be a reason why Harper and Machado have not won anything, surrounded by some fairly decent teams in the past, and I think that's got to have something to do with personality. So hey, good Bill, luck on that one. I don't know where you stand on that one.
Mike Trout hasn't won anything either.
Yeah, except MVPs, And
Bryce Harper's got one of those too.
Yeah, he does. But I don't know if
I'm the biggest Trout fan in the world.
Yep.
Here's another thing: signing two of them, they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can sign Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, or Mike Trout and Manny Machado. The Phillies have plenty of money to do that.
Yes, we have stupid money to spend.
That they do.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you for the book. We've been speaking with Jeff Passan, author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Arm, Inside the Billion-Dollar Mystery of the Most Valuable Commodity in Sports, published by HarperCollins. The book is available at your local Barnes & Noble bookstore and online at Amazon.com. You can follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Passan, Passan. And thanks for being with us and for such an informative, insightful book, Jeff.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, and personal. This is Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.